Good morning, everybody. And we have such a special program this morning, a panel talking about the body in a different way than we usually talk about it. And Katarina will introduce this panel. And I can't wait to see what we're going to make this morning. And welcome to all the new people who are here this morning.
Yes, welcome. We're going to explore the roots of direct referent formation. And in focusing, that is where we tend to pause and listen and see what emerges. And we'll begin with Greg Walkerden. Might you like to speak a bit, Greg?
Yeah, hi. Yes. Yeah, I'm a focusing practitioner from a long time, focusing teacher, but especially a sort of researcher in practice research, a lot of which is felt sense oriented. And I've been a Feldenkrais practitioner, user of Feldenkrais for about 40 years too. So
Then Tim. Yeah, like to say a word about you, Tim.
Okay, yes. I am a scientist, at least have been a scientist primarily, and I got interested in somatic practices, particularly the Alexander technique, because of a back injury. And my primary interest in the Alexander technique has been with improving pain. However, I've come to understand the wider psychological benefits that it has, and yeah, so we're talking a little bit about that today.
Wonderful.
We're a panel today, and mostly it's an opportunity for anyone to bring questions or observations. Yeah. So we're gathering the last Monday in July. Yes. In August, at Help for Helpers is always writing. We have a series of writing exercises, some from long ago and some that are new. So that's what we'll do for August. And in September, Lynn will be launching her new program. Would you like to say a few words about that, Lynn?
Oh, just very few here, but we're going to start a very international training program on how focusing philosophy and skills changes group leadership. And so this will be a 2-year program about facilitating all different kinds of groups. And we're very excited about it. We're going to have 2 sections to have 2 different time zones, 7:30 in the morning and 11:30. So watch for that.
Thank you. So let's see, Greg, would you like to offer a bit more? Or you had some.
you mean you'd like me to start talking about the things that are?
Yes, so this is
Yeah, sure.
your spot. Yes. We'll
Okay, sure.
spotlight
Yeah.
you. Yes.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, so Katarina invited me along because I'm a focusing practitioner and felt sensing oriented researcher, but also Feldenkrais has been part of my life for a long time. And I've had a project which is kind of inspired by a crossing of a process model and Eugene Gendlin's a process model and Feldenkrais, which is looking at the way in which Feldenkrais works to support kinds of movement, and contrasting that with the way in which, on the one hand, focusing and thinking at the edge work, and then on the other, the kinds of possibilities which are implied by Gendlin's philosophy of the implicit, which has a much wider lens. And so I just wanted to bring out a couple of points of resonance and contrast because and say a little bit about some of the implications. The first one that I think is really worth sitting with is that in a deep characteristic of Feldenkrais practice is that you move very gently as you do what you do, with a heightened sensitivity to how your ways of moving feel. So, like I might, for example, be doing something like working with my lower back and just lying on a mat and letting my pelvis rock backwards and forwards or move around in a circle. And as you do that, you're paying very fine-grained attention to how those movements feel. And it's not driven by a kind of performance goal in the way that a lot of somatic practices are, particularly the more mainstream ones. It's driven really by a kind of curiosity and sort of sensuous sort of exploration. And there's quite a strong parallel there with how focusing works. In focusing, we're invited to notice how a word lands in relation to a felt sense of the meaning that we have, and to notice Jen shines a very bright light on the process of noticing whether when a word or a phrase or an image comes in, whether it kind of breathes a bit of life into what we're doing, or whether it kind of has a neutral, is kind of neutral, or whether it kind of leads to a kind of feeling of diminishing or contracting or discomfort in some way. And when you compare those two practices, you can see that there's a kind of an underlying interest in what ways of moving are sensuous, what ways of moving feel good, and in keeping moving in the directions where there's a kind of a sense of well-being going on, and then pulling back into a kind of a softening and into smaller movement where things are uncomfortable. And that points to the way in which sort of proprioception and interoception, to kind of use the usual ways of contrasting things, which I think we probably need to refine, are carrying kinds of knowing about our embedding in our situations, in our environments, that's far more fine-grained and capable of being far more sensitive than we usually are paying attention to. And if you're very skilled in any practice, or reasonably skilled, I mean, an example in my case would be, say, flute improvisation, you'll notice that that as you get more skilled, that fine-grained sensitivity becomes more prominent in the shaping of your practice. And the first thing I want to do is just emphasize the practical importance of that. So the skills that we practice on the one hand in Feldenkrais and on the other hand in a related way in focusing, they both point to the potential for really fine-grained sensitivity to how our process feels to shape skillful practice. The second example I want to bring out is a contrast, where I think the focusing tradition has stuff to learn from Feldenkrais, and where the philosophy of the implicit invites a kind of wider lens. And that's the way in which focusing does something which Matthias Alexander talked about as end gaining. Alexander, which is a practice that's quite related to Feldenkrais, discovered through his own struggles how having a goal in mind, a place you want to get to, can disrupt sensitive attention to your own process in ways that make it actually difficult to move skillfully. And Feldenkrais was highly sensitized to that. And so a typical Feldenkrais awareness through movement exercise breaks down a movement into very fine-grained things. So fine-grained that if you're doing the movements as he instructs you, you don't notice that what you're doing is relevant to walking or to standing up or to various kinds of ordinary movements. And when you take that model from Feldenkrais, which takes us away from thinking about what our goals are, and really through the scaffolding helps us focus in a very fine-grained way on how our process actually is feeling as we're doing it. And you look at focusing, you see focusing is not quite as clean in that direction, because it comes out of applying philosophy of the implicit into the therapeutic context. Initially we have focusing oriented psychotherapy as a way for for psychotherapists to help people with their personal problem solving, and then focusing emerged as a kind of a means of giving therapy away. And so with focusing, there's a kind of a way in which the goal that you're aiming at sort of is more foregrounded and infuses the practice instructions more intensely. And I think there's some interesting possibilities that emerge from noticing that. The first thing is that it's possible to think about how do we do focusing instructions in a more fine-grained way, where we de-emphasize the goal that you have, whether it's a creative thinking thing like you have in Thinking at the Edge, or some kind of personal problem-solving thing, which is the paradigmatic version of focusing. And shift to really fine-grained stuff, like, for example, noticing in what's called clearing a space in focusing, noticing just what it feels to move something very slightly in the interior space, and in such a way that you actually notice the kind of fine-grained emotional tone of that. And in a similar fashion, you can really focus very close attention on what it's like when you take a handle or a candidate handle, a phrase or a word, and bring it in relationship to a felt sense and see how it moves you. And so there's a kind of a possibility of opening up focusing teaching in a way that's sensitized by what Feldenkrais does. And that kind of movement has a lot going for it from the point of view of the philosophy of the implicit, because Jen's philosophy of the implicit approach is far broader than focusing or Thinking at the Edge embody. They're just particular applications for particular purposes. But if you look at the kinds of experiential movements that he describes in detail in Experience and the Creation of Meaning in particular, and then in many other papers, you see the possibility of a much wider range of movement skills. And I've worked on things like felt sensing and conversation, agendaless focusing, which is kind of letting go the goals of focusing, and then different ways of synthesizing mindfulness and felt sensing. There's some examples, but there's lots of places you can move there. So I just think Feldenkrais offers both some exciting encouragement for and some creative opportunities for shifting what we do in the sort of Gendlin focusing, Thinking at the Edge philosophy of the implicit world.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, let's see what Tim has to say and show us.
Okay. I do have some slides. So okay, so the main thing I'm going to talk about is that typically when we think about the body and mental health, typically people think about the sensation aspect, the increase in bodily awareness and interoception, and how that uh, has been found to influence mental health. But there's another component which I think is less well understood, but also I think important, and that is the motor component, meaning our posture, how we hold ourselves, and how we move also influences mental health. So I'm going to give just a few examples of this. So here's a study where they had subjects perform a mock interview, a stressful situation, and they assessed participants' self-esteem both before and after, but they did this in two different conditions. One is where the person was sitting upright, and the other is when they were slumped. And if they were sitting upright while they were undergoing this interview, their self-esteem was not much changed by the stressful event, the interview. But if they were required to slump during the interview, there is a big hit to their self-esteem score. So in a way, the slouch posture is associated with a lower resilience to the stressor. Another example of interconnections between motor activity and mental health are the connections between depression and posture. And in fact, depression is associated with greater scoliosis, greater kyphosis, a bend in the upper spine, and also head forward posture, where the head is carried out in front of the spine. And in fact, if you look at people with scoliosis, there's a greater incidence of depression in that population, suggesting that this is potentially causal, that the alterations in the motor activity and the posture influence increase depression. And if we look at another example of head forward posture, you think, okay, well, that's just someone carrying their head forward. It's just a postural thing. There's not much to do with it. Well, actually, it has a whole lot of physiological and mental effects. For instance, people with a greater head forward posture have increased autonomic responses to stimuli. Their sensory motor control is degraded. So if they're asked to track eye targets, their ability is decreased, their postural stability is decreased, and their proprioception is decreased. And finally, if you look at cognitive effects, people with that carry their head forward have reduced inhibitory control and also score lower on mindfulness questionnaires. So somatic practices like Feldenkrais, the Alexander technique, you could lump Tai Chi and Qigong into that, as well as a whole host of somatic practices. But in general, they often address both these components. There's a sensational component where you're becoming more aware of what's happening within your body, but there's also a motor component affecting one's postural organization and affecting the quality of movement. And and we think both of these are ways in which the somatic practices can have an impact on mental health. I'll just look at some examples, and I should some examples of this from the Alexander technique, which is just what I know most. And I should just point out that Leslie Glover, who is here, is someone who has actually she's a clinical psychologist who has actually studied the Alexander technique through a number of papers and documented a lot of the psychological changes that occur from it. But in general, lessons tend to increase one's sense of presence in the moment and connection with one's emotions, and people feel like they have an increased resource to deal with adversity. And I'll just give you
Maybe
two.
we'll pause a moment for people to absorb a bit. Yes.
Okay.
And if someone has a question, you can jump in. And then Tim will show a bit more. Then we'll have a big discussion together and even breakout rooms where Greg Walkerden has created a lovely breakout room exercise for us. So a little more slides. Thank you.
Great. I just have one more after this. I'm almost done. Um, So here, I'll just give two quotes from people who have experienced psychological changes from Alexander lessons. So one is, as tensional patterns began to loosen, the person experienced both physical and emotional expansiveness and a growing recognition of many years of feeling emotionally shut down. So that's this greater connection to emotions and greater presence. And someone else is saying it isn't just a physical activity, but it's actually having an effect on my whole body, but having an effect on my mind and my spirit. So it goes beyond just the physical aspects. And finally, this is a study from Leslie Glover again. It's a study that I think is utterly fascinating. And they looked at Alexander teachers who gave lessons to patients with dementia. And typically, you might think that the Alexander technique wouldn't be helpful for this because it involves a lot of cognitive instructions. But that turns out not to be the case. And I'll just give a summary here. That the dementia participants often reported a sense of calm, along with a more global change in mood or outlook following a lesson, a softer energy of tranquility, feelings of security, much more positive outlook, especially greater accessibility to humor, smiling, liveliness, presence, happiness. They also observed more being in the present, more relaxed and contented. And we think that these changes that they're happening in patients with dementia suggests that there's something very deep going on that's interconnected, both with the awareness, but also with the motor aspect. Okay, and with that, I will stop.
Thanks very much. Somebody has a question or an observation?
I don't have a question, but more what came to me is, wow, I should take advantage of these practices of associated with Alexander and these body practices that and experiment with it myself and see how my uh, emotional life can open through that. And it was very inspiring.
Inspiring, yeah.
There's something about the attention to the minute detail of movement in the way that in therapy we pay so close attention to the minute, movements in uh, in felt sensing.
I'd like to make a comment. I found my body and my mind hanging on to every word of both of you as you presented, and having this feeling. I was exposed to Alexander and Feldenkrais quite a long time ago. I think when I fractured my leg and thigh in 1992, and was very helped by Alexander at that time. And then, like, what happened in the next 30 years, whatever it is, to the day to produce such severe scoliosis and kyphosis, and I'm 80 now. It's like I listen to you and I say, because I work on this every day in my mind and body, like, I can't move the bone structure. I mean, it's like, I know I hear the words, but like, I have to pay attention 24/7 plus for my body not to move in the way it's not supposed to. And my daughter's saying, I just spent the weekend with her in Philadelphia, Mom, stand up, you can do it, stand up. So I'm just putting that out there. It's like, your words are like fresh air, and then they're also like, oh my God, like
Mm.
an oppression of, but I have this body to deal with.
Is your daughter an Alexander teacher, Dorothy?
No, oh, I
Okay.
wish. No.
Okay. See?
But she acts that way.
I see.
Well, it's probably worth just saying that Feldenkrais, the logic that the pedagogical logic of it is that you find ways of moving that are more easeful, and then because they're more easeful, you just do it without even thinking about it.
Mm.
I think it's much the same for Alexander technique, but I don't have much experience with that. I have a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, yes.
This is Marianne. I'm off camera at the moment. I just wanted to comment on this is very fascinating. I studied Alexander technique. I had lessons once a month for I think 9 months when I was traveling to see somebody. And then I just had my first Feldenkrais session with the practitioner last week, and I love the comparison with the focusing and the slowing down and the attentiveness. Also, there's been times I've noticed, like sitting in my car, for example, as I look in the rearview mirror and it's like it's lower than it was, and I drove it yesterday and it was just fine, so I have to like adjust it. And I noticed my posture, but how I'm sitting, and the thing about slumping and sitting up straight is so true, and the impact it has on our psychological or emotional effect. So, very fascinating subjects. Thank you all.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Technology. What can you do, right? Yin agrees. I'm having a profound experience right now with a Feldenkrais teacher. So, and I have done Alexander within the past year and years ago as well. I'm very affected by somatics, so I'm profoundly study somatic experiencing. and have studied movement, authentic movement, and also yoga as well. So the profound experience I'm having right now with this particular Feldenkrais practitioner is I can, even this morning, I can see myself going into the pattern that the lesson is pointing to. And I had bad news this morning and I could see my body folding. I could feel it. And I was like, okay, here we are again. And the kindness of the lesson for me is that he had us fold even further so that we could unfold. And that's almost like a somatic experiencing. You can either go into the pattern or you can go out of the pattern. But the idea is to notice and listen to the communication of the body. And, making that profound connection to me is the key. And sometimes the sequencing of the lesson or whatever it is can help make that connection, but it takes a long time. And I know some of my friends love this stuff and some it doesn't click with them, or they're bored, or they can't do it. So I think each person finds their own teacher and way of doing things, but I feel a kinship with you, both of you, because you're talking my language. That makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Hey,
Yes,
everybody.
thank you.
It's BJ. Thank you so much, Susan, for pointing out. I was feeling such compassion, Dorothy, as you were talking, because it just seems so huge. And there are lots of modalities, and there's so many words to it. So I want to tell you about just one little thing in a microphenomenology class I took, and every single one of you can do it wherever you are. Whatever is behind your elbows, just imagine, right? What is behind your elbow and push toward it. If you're in a chair with a back, you can push into the back. If you're not, you're on a bed, imagine the mattress. Just push lightly, lightly, lightly. And where do you sense it in your body? For me, it's here. And then see if you can push even more lightly. Just a bare feather sense of your elbows touching whatever is behind them, even if it's air. And for me, that kind of electrifies me somehow.
Mm.
I could go on with a couple more, but I will tell you one more. This, just, you can do it in your lap, but just press your fingers together. And where is it? I'm going really fast. For me, I want to do this. Everybody's different. But for me, when I press, I want to hunch up like a football player. And then do it so lightly that you're imagining a feather between your fingers. And then I have this kind of a whoo. Now, let me just say, that's all there is to it. You can do it if you're mostly immobile in the bed. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
BJ.
you.
I'm wondering if anybody has observations about the connection between whole body focusing and these practices, or is it a different realm?
I know whole body focusing comes from crossing focusing in the Alexander technique, but I'm actually not a whole body focusing practitioner, so I don't know it from the inside really. Does anybody actually practice it who can speak about it?
Well, Astrid Schillings was here a few weeks ago, and she gave us a sense of listening for the environment from which somebody has come. So we will listen for what is the person speaking, conveying with their movement. Also, we can develop a sense of their history. And that is very whole body. Do some of you remember that?
I didn't mean to take us off track there, but I was intrigued with that connection.
Yes, yes.
Some of you may have focused with people who are whole body focusers. There's a phrase that just captures my imagination that I've heard several folks say, and that is the space behind my head.
Mm.
As if I'm maybe leaning against the wall of a cave. There's a space behind my head, and just dwell in that for a moment. And then someone that I focused with describes it as a part of their focusing endeavor.
Do I
I'll
understand?
follow up. I'll
Oh, sorry.
follow up on that for a moment, because we were talking about ease, how to find ease through movement being such a clear signature of Feldenkrais and and Alexander and many of the somatic worlds that were really, really popular in the 80s when I moved to New York City. And one of the things I learned from Alexander that really stayed with me forever, and I don't know if it's Alexander made or influenced by many other things that were being developed at this level of, especially among dancers and body workers, but it's the idea that, for example, the knee joint, the idea of space. So when you bend your knee, you're actually opening space. It's almost like reclaiming space as part of the body, which we usually don't. We think of the bone and this other thing and the other bone, but honoring the space and actually the idea of opening that space as means to find more ease through the body. So just to piggyback on that.
We can all feel that now as we're sitting. Oh, that knee, that ankle, and the space even between your ribs as you breathe. How there is changing all the time. Yeah. And we're wanting to move toward the breakout rooms a little early so that we can come back and talk a bit more. Oh, Michael, let's listen to you. Michael is also a Feldenkrais teacher.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Greg and Tim. This is, for me, highly exciting. Just want to take just a small moment. We're talking about awareness, aren't we? Fraction of a second, moment-to-moment awareness of the living life that we are. Just want to share an experience that I had with maybe 15 years ago with Russell Delman in an annual conference. Most of us know Russell because he's been presenting elements here at Help for Helpers. And the exercise in a huge studio was very simple. We were just standing, our backs close to a wall, and then maybe 50 feet room in front of us, we would walk forward slowly. But the intention was to see the wall in front coming closer to us as we were walking, but we were also experiencing the wall behind us moving away from us. And we did that very slowly, very simply, once or twice or 3 times without, wanting anything from a simple act like that. And there was a huge shift in my perception, which made me experience myself very differently for 3 weeks after that. I did nothing, and the exercise was so simple. It was just about being aware of what's always already the case, always there. like brings me to finish what I'm presenting in as how much am I missing every fraction of a moment by being busy doing something, you know? So how can we can't even practice this. It's just, how can I become aware as I'm doing, which is not the doing that's important, it's the being in the doing. So I don't know how to say it more simpler than that, but so thank you for what you're bringing up. It's practically very important for me to hear this and to be in the group today. Thank you.
Well, there are lovely sensuous opportunities implicit here, that's for sure.
Yeah, this, if I may, this thing that you just mentioned, Michael, I have, I think this was an Alexander technique or exercise that we did quite a lot, which is similar to what you mentioned and similar to what BJ was talking about, thinking of the space behind the neck, which naturally makes you open the back of the vertebra. But so this is a very simple exercise and it's similar to the one you mentioned, Michael, which is as you walk forward, and you can do it slowly to be much more aware, you bring into your mind the idea that you are walking backwards. It really does something wonderful if you do it slowly, so just to kind of meet you there, Michael. You can do it when you walk anywhere. If you just slow your walking a little bit and introduce the idea that you are walking backwards as you walk forward, it's pretty fabulous. We cannot do it now, sorry.
I have a question actually for sort of everybody, which is there anyone who would use this in a therapeutic context, not in the sense of in the sense of a psychological therapeutic context, who would use this sort of awareness or such exercises? Does that happen in practice, and how?
Yes, I do spiritual direction, and regularly when we pause, we do something spontaneous with an embodied something spontaneously.
Got it. Just within the session.
Just at a pause moment, as earlier Katarina so beautifully paused us. And then, she did this. And just now I noticed I did this. So something so minor. And I just want to say, I got to go, but thank you so much, Marga, for the imagining you're walking backwards. It's a great example of what I think reflexivity might be. Not reflectivity, but reflexivity, where we think about our thinking Somehow I just did that briefly, and it just came to me. Somehow this reflexivity moment. So Tim, lovely slides, thank you. And Greg, always so good to see you. I'm sorry, I got a client. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, BJ. Well, I'll put in the chat the breakout room note that was developed by Greg Walkerden this morning. And I could screen share it as well if you like.
I just wanted to make a comment about Tim's question about using this, the physical in psychotherapy.
Yeah.
And what came to me is that when I've had people who are really, really, really depressed and unable to even sit up straight, if I get them to just stand up with me, just the simple act of standing up, it makes this huge, huge difference. To just stand and be aware of your body. And of course, I stand with them and close to them. And then just the feeling of the standing. And that I've never really understood that, but I've found it to be true through the years. And of course, there can be other versions of that, of walking around the room, or the difference between in the history of psychoanalysis, Freud's discovery of lying on the couch, and we don't use that routinely anymore. But for some people, it is amazing the difference between sitting up and talking to me, and I invite them to lie on the couch, and other things open up that just wouldn't open up sitting down.
That's really interesting. Thank you, then.
Yeah, and maybe I could make a couple of comments on that too. I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm a researcher, but Feldenkrais talked about the body pattern of anxiety, which has got that leaning forward movement that's resonant of what you were using in your slides there, Tim. And so he was very consciously working with emotional states when they were part of the texture of what was actually being presented. The Feldenkrais teachers will be able to say more about than I can. And I just also mentioned that my Buddhist teacher, a woman called Julia Henderson, whose work is called Zapchen, does things like hums and rocking and blowing raspberries and all sorts of things like that as part of her somatic psychotherapy work. And there's a kind of delicious, sometimes we work cognitively, sometimes we work directly with emotional textures, sometimes we work somatically through posture. And you can work through all different avenues in quite, in ways that you're obviously recognizing. But anyway, the somatic psychotherapy world has lots of those kinds of crossings in it. You're probably pretty aware of that, I imagine. But
Greg, who did you refer to when you mentioned that work?
Julie Henderson is her name. If you go to zapchen.com, zapchen.com, you'll be able to find both some links to some of her writings and people who teach that stuff.
Thank you.
But yes, it's very playful. Humming is lovely. Surprisingly delightful, simple thing to do.
Hi, I just wanted to say something here.
Yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to say also that breath work has really helped. Doing really deep breathing from the abdomen and slowing things down. And I find even if I'm having trouble with anxiety or sleep, it just puts me into a very relaxed place, and that we don't realize so often when we're tense or anxious that we're not breathing in a deep way. We may be breathing in a shallow way. So I think breath work is also very important. And sometimes I do that in therapy with people too as well, or just a guided meditation if people are very anxious. So I think all of that works. And I personally do a lot of yoga, which changes things for me. I can walk in and have all different somatic feelings. And by the time I leave the class, I'm in a different place. I think as Susan was saying too, she does yoga. It's all body work. So just wanted to share breath. Yeah.
You guys, I'm new to the group, and I'm very pleased to be here and listen to all of you. My background is in Traeger, which is also about movement, as many of you probably know. But the other thing it's about is presence, is the present moment. And there's a way there's two things I want to show you, but there was a way of learning presence, which is to weigh your hands. And if you weigh your hands by kind of moving your hands up and down and feeling the weight of your hands, your arms actually are the connection with the weight of your hands. So you're feeling the weight in your arms and your shoulders and so on. But your hands, as you're weighing them, become emptier and emptier. And you might try that. What happens, you'll feel as you weigh your hands, you'll start to feel some tingling in your hands. If you can weigh your hands by going up and down, you can weigh your hands by going side to side. You can feel the tingling in your hands, and the tingling is the interaction of the cells in your hands with gravity. And the reason I talk about now is because gravity only happens in the present moment. It doesn't happen in the past. It doesn't happen in the future. And what you'll feel, if you start to feel the tingling in your hands, you'll also notice that your hands are flushing with blood. Okay? And the other thing that happens, if you slowly move your hands side to side, the slower you move your hands, the more you'll feel the tingling in your hands. If you even go very, very slow, the tingling gets stronger and the flushing in your hands gets much, much stronger. And what I also encourage people to do is to start to notice the feeling of that tingling in your whole body. You can feel it in your head. You can feel it in your chest and shoulders. You can even feel it in lower parts of your body that aren't even moving that much. The surprising thing is the slower you move, the more tingling. And that's because the more my fingers are actually flopping around a little bit on their own, because that tingling becomes very, very powerful. But the point is that that tingling is now. It's not in the past. It's not in the future. And if you actually move that in your body, you'll actually feel your whole body coming in to the present moment. And one of the things I have done for years with students is to have them do this and then have them walk around the room and notice that every cell in their body is tingling. And then go outside for a walk in the neighborhood. And because that tingling, it doesn't matter whether you're going uphill or downhill, you won't feel the difference between uphill and downhill because everything is that tingling that takes place in the body. The other thing that you'll find that's very, very surprising is animals will greet you. And I say that because animals live in the present moment. We don't. Our minds are preoccupied by the past and the future, by the things we want to achieve, the things that we feel bad about, and so on and so forth. But when you actually enter this zone of now, something changes, and we become much more available. I've sent people out for 15-minute walks. Don't walk with anybody else, just walk by yourself, and notice what happens. And then what happens is they all come back in 15 minutes, even though they're doing their own walks, they're doing their own thing. And what people say is, I felt like I was strolling for the first time since I was strolling with my baby through the neighborhood. So I'm saying this because it's a different state of awareness in the mind. And I personally think it's very, very much affected by the felt sense. It is the felt sense. And I have one other thing to show you, and this was Dorothy that I had. If you put your hands in your upper chest, okay, and you breathe into your hands, way up into your upper chest and breathe into your hands, what you'll notice is that your shoulders will start to come back a little bit. Okay. The next step is to use your breath to push your hands apart. So you push your hands apart, and then as you exhale, you compress your hands together, which is helping you close that chest forward, this is part of kyphosis, is the chest closing in, okay? And then empty all the way out with your breath, and the next breath will be even bigger, and you open up and push your hands out, and you'll feel your hands actually appreciating that. And then once again, as you exhale all the way out, even the yoga center in your diaphragm, empty everything. Then the next in-breath is an even bigger breath. And just notice as you've done that, notice what you feel in your chest. Yeah, I do that with people who are kyphotic. Yeah.
Thank you.
We
Thank
will have a pause now. Yes. And you see in the chat the breakout room that Greg created. Do you see it on the screen share here? I tried many different ways to make it visible. Is it?
Yeah.
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 So he says, pick some focusing move, practice doing a small part of it. So, are you ready? And Christine will make the breakout rooms with 3 people. If you prefer not to, then just don't join the room.
See you at 9:30, everybody. Have a good breakout room.
Oh, does somebody like to say a little bit about the breakout room? And then we will listen to Leslie Glover, who has some quote from Miss Margaret Goldie. Maybe we should do that now, and that could be a springboard. Leslie, would you like to read now?
I'm happy to read.
Oh, good. Yes.
So these are just a few quotes, which I collected from various sources, from an Alexander teacher, always known, I think, as Miss Goldie. So I'll just read them. Come to quiet. Now, don't do your thing. Let the mind be in the brain, and your brain is in your head. Stop your mind interfering. Stop pushing, stop pulling, stop holding. Allow yourself to be quiet and serene throughout. Now give consent and let the movement happen. Be quiet, be still, and allow for the unknown. Not in your wildest dreams can you imagine what it will be like.
Would you mind putting this in the chat? I love that quote.
Me too.
Thank you.
It is in the chat.
Thank you.
Could we also have the exercises suggested in the chat? Is that possible?
It was, and it's coming in again now.
Thank you. Thank you. As I don't usually get free time at this time to join you in the group, but today, coincidentally, it was a perfect timing to join you. So I'm really happy to be here. Sorry, I can't keep it regular, but it's great to learn what things are happening in your continuous evolution and process. So I just finished in London, the focusing FOT. So I appreciate gatherings. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We always love having new people and returning people.
I'm happy I could join you guys from Tokyo.
Oh, my. We're happy you could too. I would love to hear anything about what happened in your breakout rooms.
Well, we got a little stymied at first because we didn't know what a focusing move was.
Oh, uh-huh.
I picked up going in.
Uh-huh. Yes. Does anybody else want to say anything about a focusing move? That's interesting.
So we were exploring just the physical way we come into our body which is a focusing move, and noticing a micro movement where we're becoming more aware of our own body and noticing if that enables us to become more aware of the person we're with.
Hmm.
What did you find?
It did. I personally needed to go very slowly and not be talking about it so much as just doing it and listening to the other person talk. So I had been also imagining, what it would be like to just be aware of my elbows. If that helps re-anchor me in the present moment and hold the intention to be present to the other. Like to me, it seemed like there needed to be that general intention of I want to be present to the other, and I also want to be very aware, not hyper aware, but aware of my body, gently aware of my body. Thank you. That's been a lovely, lovely morning.
Anybody else have anything about a focusing move? What you explored there? All of these movements have both the edge of the emotional, psychological meaning making and the edge of the physicality, sensuality, in the worldness. And it's wonderful to just, look at in so many different ways that edge that's both physical, psychological, emotional, meaning making, all of it together.
Maybe I can share what we did. It really resonates with what you just said, Lynn. So looking where we practiced, and I can't remember the name of the author, sorry, I'm not good at names. Jolanta, you might remember because you were in London, but we worked to clear the space. There's a suggestion to clear a back wall, the wallpaper. So there's a nice metaphor of the wallpaper. And when we were practicing these different places coming from in that particular context, in reality, I came to a different experience. So I started using it for something else, like finding support. So thinking of a back wall behind the back of the body. And so there is a physical relationship that I kind of can define or bring with the sensation of the solid spine and my memory to recall the solidity of a wall. And gradually, very, very slowly, feeling like the body's leaning back on the back wall. And so when I felt dysregulated once or on an edge or a little bit too vulnerable, I could lean on the wall and I felt the expansion. So then I can stay with that and really see and confirm to myself without a cognitive confirmation, but the confirmation with the expansion, the width and the dimension of the wall and the qualities of depth or texture, or even the temperature, if it's warm or if it's cold. And so staying with that really brings like progressively a relationship with how the body is responding to the wall and that sense of support. And if I stay there for longer, does that change? And then there's a continuous process related to, so from the experience and relating to the felt sense itself, so the presence that's still there, into aware of the relationship with the back wall, and that reveals my storyline or my perception of the moment, or maybe wider in the picture of my life or events of that sort. And then when I stay there and I feel safe, because it's bringing me that sense of safety, then I can then get curious about what's happening in the front body. And you know, and then the imagination that comes in the present moment is like, oh, it makes it occur, you know, that I might feel the warmth of the sun, or, you know, so there's the own body looking for resources into the moment, or as well awareness of unpleasant responses that come through the staying there for a longer time, or, you know, all sorts of things, from a simple just lying on the wall, leaning on the wall. So that's what we did. And it was a group experience, really nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just about time to stop. And any last things that anyone has to share? And then we're going to end with a quote. Is that right? I just want to mention that the planning committee is going to have a very brief meeting after we end, just to make sure we have everything all set for the rest of the summer. So anybody's welcome to join the planning committee. We'll just meet for about 15 minutes.
Let me just add one more example. I was playing with this experiment earlier, and when I shift my attention to the very fine-grained movement in focusing moves, I find a whole territory of things that are crossing in my experience that kind of sit in the background usually. It's, you know, it's kind of related to Jean's sense of the richness of implying. But for example, when I was noticing myself paying close attention to how I was feeling words coming into a felt sense, and I was noticing a kind of a background anxiety about fit and not fit. And, you know, that's sort of something which can be there. It's kind of tied, I think, to that kind of goal-orientedness, sort of like you want to get somewhere. And the goal-orientedness can kind of evoke that, oh, can I make it work? I'm not sure if I can make it work. And it was kind of really interesting to kind of slow down and notice that, and then find a way to relax into just being present in a simpler, quieter kind of way. And it's that kind of experience that I was kind of hoping to point people towards. There's lots and lots of innumerable possibilities of what you might actually experience. But this kind of very fine-grained attention is opens up all sorts of possibilities for experimenting with practices.
That's a beautiful way of ending our group. Thank you.
Hi, Greg. Just to say that you achieved it. That's what I experienced. So thank you for the experience.
Lovely.
I remember Jean saying that in ancient times, the value was in gold, and now the value is in attention, and that attention is to our time as gold was to time, you know, thousands of years ago. Of course, gold is gold is making a comeback, but but that's all of the various ways that we can hone attention and the power of attention. It's amazing. Okay, so we'll see you next week, everybody, and we're going to start our writing adventure, and we'll have many different ways of talking about writing and expression in that way and focusing in that way. So I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Mm.
Thank you.
Bye.